Introducing Brian Blog's audio articles, now available only at Brian Blog's Corner Club at www.patreon.com/Brian Too Bad TV Solange, my newest upgrade for valued patron members. For older blogs, you can now click on the audio file attachment below the written article. Download it on your Android, iPhone, laptop, or desktop. For newer blogs, simply click on the audio strip as seen in this illustration, and then listen along as you read it, or just choose to listen as I personally narrate yet another one of my classical masterpieces. It will be just like listening to my public videos on YouTube, BitChute, and Black Avenger TV, only you will have exclusive access to audible and written material available only to paying patron members. For as little as $7 a month, you can become a member of this important club of like-minded thinking individuals. Get the latest updates on news, stories trending on social media, and cold case files, as well as new revelations on historical events and political issues. With Brian's blog audio articles, you now get twice the content for the same price. Again, if you want to enjoy a members-only club where you get to choose whether you want to read or listen to my awesome content, sign up for as little as $7 a month. That's less than a standard fast food combo meal these days. Become a member of Brian Blog's Corner Club at www.patreon.com/Brian Too Bad TV Solange and enjoy exclusive access to audio article blog library only available at the Brian Blog's Corner Club today.
If you don't want, you don't have to.
Get in trouble.
If you don't want, you don't have to.
Get in trouble.
If you don't want, you don't have to.
Get in trouble.
Say you better leave my woman alone. Well, I know you are a playboy, and you've got women all over town. But listen, buddy, if you ever sweet talk my little girl, I'm gonna lay your body down. If you don't want, you don't have to.
Get in trouble.
You know you don't want. Oh yeah. If you don't want, you don't have to.
Get in trouble.
Oh, you better leave my woman alone. Well, I know you got your money, and you've got a new 56 too. But if I ever see my little girl in your new car, I'm gonna do some work on you. If you don't want, you don't have to.
Get in trouble.
You know you don't want. Oh yeah. If you don't want, you don't have to.
Get in trouble.
Oh, you better leave my woman alone.
What's going on, YouTube? So this is going to be part 2 of society's image of black women and why society has gone down the shitter. Okay? Now, the face of this young woman here that you're seeing obviously is vintage, and a lot of you probably have absolutely no idea who this is. That's good, because I get to tell you. Her name is Claudette Colvin. Claudette Colvin, and she played a pivotal role she would have played a pivotal role in these Negroes' civil rights movement if it were not for the fact that her actions or reactions on a Montgomery City bus in 1955 were not willingly ignored by the NAACP during that whole time period when they decided to take action in both boycotts, nonviolent demonstrations, and of course federal lawsuits against the state of Alabama, which of course, as many of you know, sparked what many consider to be the modern civil rights movement. Now, Claudette Colvin actually preceded Rosa Parks with a incident which occurred on March 2nd, 1955. About 8 months, let me see, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. Yeah, it was about 9 months before Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a Montgomery area city bus to a white man. Claudette Colvin was the first black woman noted, at least by the NAACP. I'm sure there had been many niggas before either one of these broads that got arrested and thrown in jail, in years previous, that just said, man, I'm tired, I just got off work, I just came from class, man, fuck you crackers, I ain't getting up out of shit. I'm sure there were plenty of niggas that did that, okay? But of course, history tells us, and this is why, if you're not a Patron member, you need to go over there and sign up now and listen to my 32-minute long audio about why #MeToo will never come after Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy, because I actually touch on this in that audio blog, and I discuss about how those who write history, they have a vested interest in telling history the way they want it to be told. But in addition to that, this story is also, and perhaps far more importantly, about the title in hand. It represents the title at hand, okay? How the difference between how women were viewed, and as a result, how they either carried themselves, or how, people within their communities saw and treated them then and now, which is why we have had for so long, especially prior to that stream that I did, a false perception that black women were any different, or black men for that matter, were any different back then than they were now. We have this false perception that our grandmothers were, good church-going, married women that were devoted to their husbands and their children, and they were joining hands with Martin Luther King and marching and singing the Bible hymn and all of this stuff. But once we actually dig into history and we look at the information that is so widely available these days, it's so widely available. I found out recently that Martin Luther King's name wasn't even Martin Luther. His birth name was Michael King. He adopted the name Martin Luther, and he never legally changed his name, even though he was buried as Martin Luther King. His government name is Michael King, but that's a subject for another video. But the fact of the matter is, okay, the reason why there's a perception of the cocktail dress, and wig wearing, neat, petite, polite, feminine woman from back then is because that is the image that society portrayed of women, as opposed to what I showed in my last video, that Cardi B whore, now admitted whore, an admitted stripper, disgracing the cover of women's fashion magazines amongst other fucking atrocities that she's allowed to partake in, okay, thanks to mass media that's promoting this stupid slut, okay. So into the story of Claudette Colvin. On March 2nd, 1955, Claudette Colvin, she was returning home from school. She attended a segregated school in the Montgomery, Alabama area called Booker T. Washington School. And she was sitting in the colored section of a Montgomery city bus. And while sitting in that section, the bus got crowded. And for those of you who are not familiar with segregationist policies, especially in Alabama, when a city bus got crowded, okay, the blacks, even in the colored section, were supposed to either move back further, or they were supposed to stand completely up, depending on how crowded the bus was, to let other white people sit down. So the bus got really crowded, and some white people came on the bus, and the bus driver ordered several Negroes to get up and move further back in the colored section, which they did. Okay, but then, even with white people filling now parts of the colored section of the bus got even more crowded, and so now they was gonna start having niggas stand up. So the bus driver, he turned around and he ordered the Negroes that were there to all stand up and move into the center aisles so that the white people can sit down. Again, this is in the colored section, which, just demonstrates to you the stupidity of racism. I'm not pro-integration, but, just the stupidity of racism. Now, these honkies, they were too good to sit in the color section, too good to sit with black people, but when there ain't no space on the bus, then they can put their white asses in the same place where black asses are sitting. That just shows you the complete stupidity of fucking racism. Anyway, so when Claudette Colvin was ordered to get up, her and another black female were the only females who refused to give up their seats, and there were some white women that were approaching the colored section that were trying to sit down. So the bus driver, he ordered them several times, Claudette Colvin, several times with the other woman, black woman, to get up out of their seats and let the two white women sit down. Claudette Colvin, sorry guys, she started talking back to the bus driver, and she was saying that it was her civil right to sit in a seat where she had paid her fare on a bus, okay, which it was. So then the bus driver, after arguing with her for a minute and getting up out of his seat and going to the back, trying to entice her to get up, he called the police. He summoned the police. The police came on the bus, and initially the police were trying to quell the situation, okay, and they convinced a couple of other people convinced the woman that was the other black woman that was refusing to get up out of her seat with Claudette Colvin. They persuaded her to get up out of her seat so one of the two white women could sit down. But Claudette, she stood her ground, and eventually, like Rosa Parks, she was arrested, handcuffed, and taken to jail. She was booked for assault, which she didn't assault anybody. She just talked back to the policeman and the bus driver. But of course, this was the old Bull Connor South. So talking back to a white person back then was assault. Go figure. And she was charged with disorderly conduct and disturbing the peace. Now, fast forward a year later, in 1956, Claudette Colvin was one of 5 black women. And you pay special notice to the fact that the NAACP filed a federal lawsuit. I think it was called Gale versus Alabama or something like that, or Galen versus Alabama. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but they didn't use any black men in this lawsuit. It was only black women, 5 black women who had accused the city civil services of discriminating against them as paying customers on city buses. Okay, and Claudette Colvin was part of this federal lawsuit filed by the NAACP on behalf of the Alabama chapter of the civil rights movement. Now, in that federal lawsuit, the circuit court in Alabama, they ruled in favor of the women in this class action lawsuit against the city of Montgomery. Okay, and it ruled that Montgomery's policy of segregated bus seats was indeed unconstitutional. So the state of Alabama, it filed an appeal. It went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and in 1957, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled again in favor of the NAACP and the women in Montgomery in this class action lawsuit that segregation on city buses was unconstitutional and ordered them to end that segregationist policy. Now here's the deal, okay? The question a lot of you may be having now is, if Claudette Colvin was so pivotal in the civil rights movement, and actually her actions both on March 2nd, 1955, 9 months before anybody knew who Rosa Parks was, and her actions in testifying in the federal case were probably more effective than the bus boycotts themselves, which actually only ended after the U.S. Supreme Court came down on the side of the NAACP and the anti-segregationists. Okay, why have most of us never heard the name Claudette Colvin? Now, this is going to tie into both how those who choose to write history choose to write it for the sake of shaping public opinion and understanding, okay, and intentionally leaving things out, and sometimes outright delivering misinformation. And also it is going to tie in to how the difference between how women carried themselves back then and now, and if they didn't carry themselves in a particular way, they were shunned, because it was seen as a walk of shame if women carried themselves in a certain way, especially in a way that would be, synonymous with degenerate behavior. Now it turns out that the NAACP had been planning to spark the civil rights movement for several years prior to 1955, and they were mapping out plans on how to do it. They were certain that they were going to use an incident where there had been a confrontation between police and Negro citizens of a particular segregationist city in the South, to help spark the movement and bring publicity to their cause. Okay? Originally, they looked at Claudette Colvin and her refusal to give up her seat on the bus prior to Rosa Parks as a story to publicize to spark the movement. But there were a couple of problems with Claudette Colvin. When the leaders of the NAACP, when they sat down and they looked at Claudette Colvin's case, they looked more at her. Okay? Pay attention to this. They looked more at her than they looked at the case, which was almost identical to the Rosa Parks case 9 months later. And what they determined is, because of Claudette Colvin's things that were included in her personal life, and pretty much her appearance, they could not use her as the spark plug for the civil rights movement beginning in Alabama. Okay? Because it turns out that Claudette Colvin was a 15-year-old. This is going to blow your mind. This is going to blow your fucking mind, and it's probably going to make you look at your grandmama even more sideways than you was already looking at her after we got done doing that live stream a couple of months ago. Claudette Colvin was a 15-year-old high school student that, get this, was pregnant by not only a married man, but she was pregnant at the time that she refused to give up her seat on March 2nd, 1955, 9 months before Rosa Parks. She was pregnant by a prominent white businessman in the Montgomery area that supposedly was sympathetic to the the civil rights cause. This girl, which probably made her feel like, which probably emboldened her to refuse to get up out of her seat, because she had got knocked up by a white man, a grown white man who was married with a wife and children, banging a 15-year-old dark-skinned black chick, black high school student, a freshman at that. She wasn't even, 18. Okay? His name was Elliot Klein, who was the son of German immigrants, okay, that came over here in the late 19th century. And they settled in Alabama, and his family owned several, like small corner stores. They had like a little corner store chain across several states, which included Georgia, Alabama, and Florida. Okay, so they were relatively wealthy. And this dude knocked up a 15-year-old Claudette Colvin, okay, who was, she was part of a student organization tied to the NAACP, who they got like extra credit in class in the segregated high school for writing papers on, black history and their civil rights. And she said she claimed what inspired her to refuse to give up her seat that March 2nd day in 1955 was she had just got done writing a paper on how black people couldn't use dressing rooms in department stores in Alabama if they wanted to try on clothes that they wanted to buy. Okay? And so she says that that's what inspired her. But I personally now think, knowing what I know about black women, this story, it caught me off guard, but it didn't surprise me. Okay? When I saw this, and of course she had to be darker skinned than Rosa Parks. When I saw this, it didn't surprise me because I realized the real reason probably why she didn't give up her seat was probably because after getting banged out and knocked up by this white dude, this grown-ass white dude, married man and prominent businessman in Montgomery, she probably thought that she was good as white folks. She said, man, I got a white dude, a damn white millionaire knocking the bottom out of it every single fucking night. I'm sleeping with the husbands of these very white women that want to take my seat on this bus. I ain't getting up. And so, longer story short, the NAACP, when they met with members of the SCLC, including Dr. Martin Luther King and Reverend Ralph Abernathy, which was King's right-hand man throughout the civil rights movement until his death in 1968. They sat down, and first they interviewed, because what they would do is they would interview people that they wanted to use, just like the people who write history, the way they want history told, of course. The NAACP, they understood the importance of promoting an image and promoting a story to push a certain narrative, to, increase the chances of them justifying their cause. So they interviewed Claudette Colvin, and after interviewing her, they met with each other later on throughout the spring and summer of 1955, and they decided against using Claudette Colvin for a couple of reasons. Number one, because they felt like she was too young, and she just wouldn't be seen by the national media as really mature. She was yelling, "It's my civil rights, it's my civil rights," as the police were dragging her off the bus pregnant. But she would be seen as not mature enough to be viewed as a role model of civil rights. And another thing, again, back to the thing about them picking a black woman, or in Rosa Parks' case, a half-black woman, to spark the civil rights movement. I noticed particularly odd that while almost all members of the SCLC and NAACP, all the ranking members, were men, okay? They didn't even think, not even once, to select a man to, perhaps be the front cover, so to speak, of sparking their movement, right? So that was one of the reasons why they didn't choose Claudette Colvin. The other reason, obviously, was because she was a 15-year-old girl, basically a child that was pregnant with a kid. Now, this tells me a couple of things. Number one, this tells me that this whole swirling nonsense, that the girl who swirls acts like it's something new, this shit has been going on behind closed doors, as we've already discussed. This crap has been going on for decades, for centuries, okay? And not only has it been going on, but quite the scandal, it has been going on with grown-ass white men sleeping with not only dark-skinned, but underage dark-skinned girls, okay? Sexual deviancy and perversion, even that motherfucker that was Malcolm X's protege, Elijah Muhammad, he was impregnating like 14 and 15-year-old girls with his light-skinned half-breed behind. This entire thing of people race mixing and being sexually deviant is nothing new. It's nothing new under the sun. It's just new to some of us, who are Generation X. But this shit has been going on. A lot of you, when you look at this Claudette Colvin, who's still alive, she's 79 years old, and I believe she lives in New York City. When you look at her now, and she's finally, they just got around to acknowledging her, the Civil Rights Museum or something, they included a piece in there for her in like 2014 or something like that. Claudette Colvin is finally just now getting around to getting recognition for her part in being a pivotal participant in the early victories of the civil rights movement. Most people didn't even know who the hell this woman was until, this decade, okay? But when I look at this woman in older age, I start to realize, like when I talked about how my grandmother on my mother's side had 5 children by 5 different men and was never married. And Claudette Colvin was never married, and she was dark-skinned, like most of the women in my family. I started to realize this shit of worshiping and deifying white men. Even my grandmother on my dad's side, he said that his mom, my grandmother, she married a black man, but she intentionally married the lightest skinned Negro that she could find, which wound up cheating on her and leaving her, and had women with other children. I realized this deification of whiteness, as I told you guys, and even in that video series I did called Burning Away the Blackness, about black women, burning the hair and scalps of their daughters. The first patent for a hot comb was secured in 1872 by a black woman before Madam C.J. Walker, just 7 years after slavery officially ended, which is why I said it never ended. These niggas have been fucking whites they've been trying to be white, they've been having babies with white folks, and they've been deifying whiteness since the slave plantation. This is nothing new. Niggas getting upset talking about, they hate bed wenches. Look, I don't care nothing about bed wenches. It's, it's an unfortunate thing to see and deal with in our society, but it doesn't bother me anymore the way it used to, because now I know not to expect anything from black women. Okay, as a collective, I know not to expect anything from them, because as some of you brothers said, since slavery, they were never psychologically our women to begin with. And you Negroes, the same damn thing. Y'all don't get off the hook. Martin Luther King was screwing white and light-skinned hookers like it was going out of style behind his wife's back, who, oh, by the way, was light-skinned and a half-breed herself, Coretta Scott King. So, and the damn black Muslims, speaking of Elijah Muhammad, they made a what's his name, Chris Tucker said in Rush Hour, said damn blackanese. They made a damn black niece, the leader of their fucking organization, the Fruit of Islam. You can look at Elijah Muhammad and tell that he's mixed with Asian. I mean, again, this shit has been going on for how long now? Huey Newton and the Black Panthers. Obviously, the dude is biracial. Obviously. So, this Claudette Colvin, when I found out that she was the first black female not to give up her seat off the bus, and I found out why the NAACP did not promote her story, and I'm sure that her being dark-skinned and also having the baby of a white man probably had something to do with it as well, in addition to being 15 years old and pregnant. But when I found out her story, it didn't surprise me. It did not surprise me in the least. Neither did it surprise me when I found out that Rosa Parks, who was biracial, she's pushed as a black woman, but she's biracial. She was married to a biracial dude that was mostly white. None of this surprises me, okay? But the point is, the reason why we had the misunderstanding, okay, and the fallacy in our brains that black women and women in general were better back in, the baby boomer generation, the 50s and 60s, post World War II, pre-World War II generations, is because this was the image of women that was pushed. Feminine, polite, petite, act like a woman, act like a good girl. Even though most of these hoes were nothing but. They were a lot of these females, man, Claudette Colvin included, who was always, by the way, salty at the fact that a lighter-skinned Rosa Parks got all the credit. Every interview Claudette Colvin, who's still alive, Rosa Parks, she died some years ago. Every interview that she does, now that she's finally getting recognition as the first real black woman not to get up out of her seat, she always shows bitterness towards Rosa Parks. That's another classic trait of black women, being jealous of biracial females. When the truth of the matter is, if she hadn't let some fucking white dude knock her up at 15, she might have been the face that sparked the civil rights movement. But she couldn't be used because she was seen as damaged goods, which she was. And unfortunately, like most black women, is to this day. So, this is just going to contribute to how, I look at black women, even older black women. I'm talking about like grandmother and great grandmother age black women completely differently than I did, say, even 5 years ago. I look at them completely differently because, society tells us that they're older, they're wiser. Just because they got a wrinkled face, you're supposed to treat them with respect. They know more than you. They lived a life of decency. No, we just wasn't around when they were doing most of their deviant fucking behavior. There was a time when they were young, they were fresh, they were tight, just like us. And a lot of them were participating in all kinds of manner of scandalous, mischievous, and juvenile fucking immature ass behavior, up to and including screwing people they didn't have no business screwing at a time when they didn't have no business screwing. I mean, if you had told me 10 years ago that there were black women that were being impregnated at 15 years old back then, especially by men who weren't even in the black community, I wouldn't have believed you one little fucking bit. But now, we know what the game is. So anyway, guys, that concludes this series. Thank you so much for listening. Again, make sure you sign up on Patreon. Become a paid Patreon member for just $7 a month. Got a very good and well-detailed, my latest blog uploaded over there just a couple of days ago, uploaded and produced, about why #MeToo will not come after the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. It includes a 32 plus minute audio. And also, anybody who wants to be involved on the live stream, where we're going to be touching on black men that are fighting in the court systems or have fought in the court systems, win, lose, or draw, to gain custody of their children. please email me. My email will be down in the description box. It's briansolonge2@gmail.com. That's BrianSolong2@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and talk to you later, guys.
Get in trouble
You know
if
you
you
don't
don't want
want,
to.
oh yeah. If you don't want, you don't have to.
Get in trouble,
Oh, you better leave my woman alone. Well, I don't believe in trouble, so I don't want to start a fight. So if you'll take heed and stay away from my little girl, then everything will be alright. If you don't want, you don't have to.
Get in trouble
You know
if
you
you
don't
don't want to.
want, yeah.
Get in trouble
If you don't want, you don't have to.
Get in trouble,
Oh, you better leave my woman alone. My woman alone, my. You better leave my woman alone. I said, you better leave my woman alone. Oh yeah, you better leave my woman alone. If you don't want, you don't have to.
Get in trouble if you don't want, you don't have to. Get in trouble
If you don't want, you don't have to.